Well, thank you, Kayla. Hi, David. My name's Arash. I'm actually a sports broadcaster. Up until about 2 years ago, I knew nothing about your field, and I feel that ever since I've joined Kayla and Harshald's group at CXO, I've gotten a crash course in AI and generative AI, ChatGPT, cyber attacks. I've got an MBA on the fly, learning about your industry. And my role in all of this is to host the event and kind of direct traffic in the panel conversations to try and keep this as conversational as possible. I find that in a Zoom video call era, especially since the pandemic, we've kind of gotten tailored to speaking our piece and then turning our phones off and muting our microphones.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make this as interactive a day as possible, trying to get the entire group engaged and involved. So that's with my hosting background, with my ability to kind of story tell, etc. That's where my role is here. And part of the reason we have this conversation is that so if one of your counterparts on the panel has something to say that's similar to what you think, that's different to what you think, I can help kind of navigate that traffic as the afternoon goes on, and try and just kind of tie the bow on everything. So that's where my involvement is, just to give you a little bit of background and a little
Okay.
bit. Of,
Sounds good.
yeah. I guess just right off the top, because I find this fascinating, as somebody who's in sports broadcasting, the way we consume content is so different. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we were relying on the daily newspaper and radio, and now it's kind of on our phones. 5 years ago, Instagram was a place we posted photos, and TikTok was the clock on your grandfather's mantelpiece. Um, and so when people ask me, what's the future of your industry? My answer to them is, well, we'll probably be consuming content 5 or 10 years from now on a platform that doesn't exist today. If I were to say to you, what was the role of the CISO 5 years ago? It's probably so different than it is today. If you were to kind of look into your crystal ball of what you think might be ahead 2, 3, 5 years from now, what's the CISO role, David, in your mind?
So TikTok to me is still a 200-year-old grandfather clock in my lounge.
Yes. Yes, I like it.
Um, it's a really interesting question that I've been asked before.
Sure.
And the simple fact is what we do doesn't change that much.
Really,
But
huh?
the technologies and how they're used does. And I'll give you a really good example.
Sure.
We'll keep it current. AI.
Yeah.
Okay. Last year, middle of last year, there was an awful lot of chatter around how AI was going to make the world a much less safer place. The defenders were going to be overwhelmed. Um, there were going to be all sorts of mistakes by organizations in using AI so that they would expose their organizations to data loss, attacks, all the myriad of things that we see going on. And some of that is true, but the simple fact is it's really like any other conflict. You're in a constant cycle of either keeping up or trying to get ahead. Um, and I mentioned AI because actually, for me, AI is a technology that needs to be secured. Yeah, and I can break down an AI solution into its component parts. I can analyze the data flows, analyze the types of data that are being stored, and I can build a protective regime around that. And for me, it's about sort of making sure that I don't care what we're using, but whatever we do use, making it as safe as possible. And it's just all part of this. I'm ex-military, and there's Air Force, and there's this concept of the OODA loop, where you're always trying to get inside your opponent's operational cycle. And if you can get inside their operational cycle and you can break it, then you can exploit the weakness. But if you can maintain the integrity of that cycle, then you will be protected and you will be able to operate as you want to.
Right. How much? Okay, so I love that answer. So how much of your role was about what you did and not your opponents or other people in the industry? And how much of it was kind of the competitive aspect? Like, what was that kind of balance? What was it? What is it? If you think back, through the lens of the last, I don't know, 3, 4 years.
Um, the primary focus is always on trying to implement what I refer to as good cyber hygiene. But fundamentally, if you can implement a regime where you meet the core principles of cyber defense, you're it's not very scientific, but I've heard it many times. It's like the Pareto rule, 80-20. If you can get to the point where you've got good cyber hygiene and you've nailed the fundamentals, you've probably mitigated 80% of the threat.
Really, huh?
Yeah, that's it may have changed, but broadly speaking, that is something that I hear very regularly. Um, and the trying to think about and predict what that 20% of the threat is going to be, the black swans in this world, that is really difficult. You could expend a huge amount of energy and time and money trying to make all these predictions. And quite frankly, we as humans, we lack the imagination to accurately predict what's going to happen. Um, if I'm spending 80% of my time thinking this is how I'm going to protect the organization, and I'm only spending 20% of my time trying to predict what my opponents, if you like, are trying to do, they've got 100% of their time dedicated to one thing and one thing only. That is
Right,
overcoming defense. They
right.
will. So actually, I need to think more or concentrate on defensive measures, know that at some point there'll be a failure, and be ready to respond to whatever that failure is.
Right. So let have you had to deal with the failure part, the cyber attack part? Yeah.
Certainly, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of times. Um, in fact, a really good example, and I can talk about this now because it is quite old.
Okay.
So, back in 2017, the NotPetya virus broke.
Which virus?
The NotPetya,
Not Petier?
yeah,
Okay.
2017.
Okay.
So this was an attack that was essentially aimed at Ukraine. And I mean, it exploited vulnerabilities in Windows.
Yeah.
Um, but it spread way beyond the Ukraine. I mean, it literally started, then moved westward, and it just happened that I was in a role where I was told about 3 hours before it became public knowledge that this virus was going to hit us.
Jesus.
And that gave me a window of opportunity with the team I was working with on very limited information to do an assessment of what it meant for the organization where I was working at the time.
Mhm.
And our assessment actually was that we didn't believe we were exposing any external services that could be exploited by NotPetya. Okay. You know, we'd we'd covered off the cyber fundamentals, and we'd actually patched that particular vulnerability in the services that we were presenting externally. But we did know that there were services internally that if it got in, it would do a lot of damage. And we did two things. So I briefed my boss at the time and I said, right, this is where we are. We don't believe you need to do a massive knee-jerk reaction. But what we do need to do is make sure that our internal boundaries are as robust as we think they are.
Mhm.
So that was Friday afternoon, about 4 o'clock.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so we found out about it, what, about 1 o'clock, I think. We were aware of it about 1 o'clock. So we, in that space of time, we'd been told, we assessed it, we drew up a plan, and we made a clear recommendation. This is how we're going to deal with this. The reaction of the business was, we hear everything you say, but you are now going to spend a weekend ensuring that every single patch that needs to be applied across the organization is applied. And then for the next 48 hours, there was literally a meeting every 3 to 4 hours whereby we were just monitoring that all the services had been patched. And there's two things about that which are worth noting. So the first one is that actually we had a pretty good understanding of what the threat was.
Right.
Okay. With hindsight, I admit, but we had a pretty good understanding. And actually, the second lesson from this is some organizations cannot afford to do nothing in the face of threats. They have to be seen to be doing something to protect themselves. Because if the wheel comes off and they hadn't taken that action, they would have been crucified.
So it's almost optics.
Some of it is optics.
Yeah. Wow. So you said that this has happened a couple of times.
Yeah.
The second time, was it a similar situation? Was it different?
Um, no, and I can't go into too much detail because
No
this is
problem.
much more modern. But basically, I was, I got a phone call or a Slack message or whatever, and I was basically told that a particular service that was running that was critical to our organization um, had a serious zero-day vulnerability, but it had a fix. Now, the organization that I'm talking about actually was 24-hour operations. So this service, in theory, had to be online 24/7. But as I was briefed, the the basically the situation was, if we left this service online unpatched, then there was a very high chance that it would have been found.
Right.
So without recourse to anyone, I took the service offline. I just said, no, it, it goes offline. Tell me how long it's going to take you to fix it.
Yeah. How
Um,
long was it offline for?
so I was told that it would be fixed, um, I think in 12 hours.
Yeah.
It was actually offline for about 18.
18?
Yeah. And I also had a bit of luck in that whilst, yes, we did use this service every day, actually the the operational cycle meant that there was actually a minimal impact into disabling that service in the way that I did.
Right. Roughly, I'm not looking for specifics. How long ago was this?
Um, 2 or 3 years ago.
2, 3 years ago. So this is great stuff. Thank you for being so candid, and be great to talk to your like in front of your counterparts about this. So when the dust settled the first time and
Yeah,
when the dust settled the second time,
yeah.
what were your takeaways? What were your learnings? What were your, okay, if this is to happen again, how would we handle it? What worked, what didn't? What's the unpacking part of each of these instances, David?
Um, so in the first instance, it's no matter how well briefed you are, or sorry, no matter how well you prepare a brief, dependent on the type of organization you're working in, you're not always going to get a rational answer.
Huh. Yeah,
That 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 was a key takeaway. Um, and actually, the guy that I briefed, I actually had a huge amount of time and still do for that individual. Um, he was a person of strong opinions but high integrity.
right.
Okay, so I, at a professional level, I would have to say, actually, I think you wasted a hell of a lot of money. But as someone who is a leader and expected to take action, I actually don't think I think it would be wrong to fault what he did.
Yeah.
Um, and on the second one, I think the thing, and this is something that a lot of CISOs in the room, I think, will resonate with them. When you go to your boss and you say, and by the way, I've just turned off a critical service and it will be back online in 12 hours. You know, the
Yeah.
the reaction is, are you mad? You don't have the authority to do that. What do you think you're doing? I mean, you get both barrels a lot of the time. My boss's reaction was, thank you. That was the right decision.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the only question he asked me, which I had preempted, was, how long is this going to take to fix?
Right. So that's very interesting because obviously, I'm assuming your boss is the CEO,
He's one of the senior.
one of the senior. So I'm assuming that for you to get that reaction, it means you've had buy-in from him on a number of steps along the way to get to this point of, hey, this is what we need to be from a security standpoint. When we go back to that original question of what was the role 5, 10 years ago to what's the role now or what's the role in the future, 10 years ago is probably fix my password and, why isn't the printer working? Now you have buy-in of, hey, this is a serious thing that I'm going to disable, and your boss was okay with that. Your boss probably wouldn't have been okay with that a number of years ago when they had no understanding of what it is you actually did. So what are some of your kind of strategy, what have been some of your strategies and tactics to get buy-in from them, to get understanding from the business side that may not necessarily know about technology, information security, etc., so that when an attack happens, he's knowledgeable enough to know that what you did was the right thing. Does that make sense? Like my question?
Um, yeah, it does. The so, and I've learned this over time. So I think one of the mistakes that CISOs make is that they see, if you like, the term and the label of CISO as meaning power. Okay, it doesn't. The you know, being a CISO and having power are two separate things. And I think you have to be really careful as a CISO in your approach to whatever organization you're dealing with, because fundamentally you need to have their confidence and their trust.
Right.
Um, and without those, you can say what you like. No one is going to take any notice of you. Yeah, the first time you turn around and you say, "Turn that service off," or whatever you do, um, and you're ignored, that is the last time you're an effective CISO.
Right.
And I spend a lot of time really thinking about relationships. I spend more time trying to make myself seen across an organization so that people know who I am. One is they know I'm a human being and not just some grey person that sits in an office. Um, and the other thing is that it's not just that I'm a human, a human person. It's I'm there as part of delivering the entire business capability. It's not about I'm there to secure it and stop everyone doing their work.
Right. So every business has a different evolution, has a different. How long did it kind of take you to continue to kind of chop wood, chop wood, chop wood, that you finally felt, you know what? I think they're hearing what I'm saying.
Um, One
Or
towards the end.
is that March 3rd, 2025 and counting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm towards the end of my career, so
Nice.
it's
Nice.
it's taken a while.
There you go. Yeah, it took a while. Yeah. So what were some of the strategies? Like we're trying to in the room, I'm just trying to think in the room. I think a lot of people would love to hear how you got the buy-in. What were some of them? You said, I want everybody to realize I'm a human being. I want everybody to realize what we're doing has the business's best interests in mind, etc. It's funny because a coach can tell a player, hey, go run in a straight line and then 10 yards later turn left. Now athletes want to know the why. Um,
Yeah.
it takes a while for the coach to get that buy-in from the athlete. I'm wondering what were some of your methods to get that buy-in from the overall business?
Um, so it's an evolutionary thing.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I had a full career in the military, and I can on my first tour. So I was in Germany on a police squadron, and I can't remember what it was, but there was something happened, and I was just all ready to come out of the corner and fight because that's what I thought was the right thing to do. And I can remember my squadron commander at the time, who was really experienced guy. He's I sort of went to him and I said, right, this has happened. I've got to go and do this, that, and the other. And he turned around and he said, you need to choose your battles.
Hmm.
He said, you're not going to win this one. So,
That's a
that
life lesson, David.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something I've never forgotten. And then the other thing, just to your point about, athletes always asking, what's the why?
Yeah.
So I was a Royal Air Force policeman.
Okay.
Okay. Now, Royal Air Force policemen actually have a reputation for questioning why they're being asked to do something. Um, and I've had the why question so many times in my military career that by the time I left and started my new career in Civvy Street, I'd already learnt the lesson that actually you really do have to explain to people. You have to expend a huge amount of effort and sometimes personal capital explaining to people. Um, and I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush here,
Sure.
but software engineers are a difficult, grumpy group of people. And if you cannot explain what you are doing, quite frankly, they make life difficult.
Yeah.
And again, I just said something, at the beginning of my career, in this particular role, I have expended huge amounts of energy actually just saying to people, this is why we're doing this.
Right. Right. But
But
there's
the
a
key,
payoff. But there's a payoff.
there is, and the payoff is when they come up to you after a presentation or a briefing and they say, that was really useful.
Yeah.
That's really helped me understand.
Yeah. 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 That's great. David, time is not our friend, but I think we got
It's
a
not.
lot of good stuff to work with here. I'll just leave you with this from my standpoint. I'll totally direct the conversation. I'll cue you up, set you up, etc. But when we're sitting there with your fellow panelists, if somebody says something that you agree with, disagree with, that it reminds you of something, don't feel the necessity for me to prompt you. Feel free to kind of elaborate, add, etc. when we're up there, and that'll just make things a little more free flowing.
Yeah.
Uh, by all means, please feel free to do that. And I just wanted to kind of share that with you because I always find the comfort level on these panels happens in the last 15 minutes, not the first 45 minutes. So I'm trying to make this as loose and comfortable for everybody. So I just wanted to share that with you, that it's not necessarily me prompting you. You please feel free to do that too.
Okay.
Well,
Sounds
listen,
good.
yeah, I look forward to seeing you in person next month.
Yes.
Yes,
Hopefully it will be good.
it'll be a great conversation. It'll be a great conversation. Okay, see you soon. Thank you, Kayla.
Yes.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your
Cheers,
afternoon or
Ash.
evening. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.